Good afternoon and welcome back to the Bellingham City Council committee meetings. Today is February 22nd, 2021, and our first meeting this afternoon is the Public Health, Safety and Justice Committee. And I just want to confirm that Councilmember Knutson is not with us this afternoon, and Councilmember Anderson will be sitting in on this committee, and it's chaired by Councilmember Hamel. So I hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Council President. I'm joined this afternoon by Council Members Anderson and Huffman on this committee. We have one item before us today. This is Agenda Bill 22915. This is an ordinance amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget, increasing appropriations in the general fund. The proposed ordinance will recognize $708,000 in grant revenues from the Federal Emergency Management Agency and add $1,104,000 in expenditures in the fire department and general fund to replace all 130 of the department's self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. These devices are critical safety equipment for the city's firefighters, providing breathable air when fighting fires. The current complement of SCBA equipment reaches its end of useful life in 2022. This ordinance will ensure the department has the equipment it needs to fight fires as safely as possible. The city will use $396,000 of general fund unrestricted reserves for the portion not covered by the grant, including the 10% grant match. And here to take us through is Fire Chief Bill Hewitt.
Yeah, good afternoon, Council. So yes, our SCBA have been, our self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, have been on our radar here for quite some time, that they are nearing their end of life. We were able to, we've tried a couple of times in the past to apply for grants for this. However, the grant programs are, we've had a couple unsuccessful tries, and then we were awarded a grant here last year for this replacement. Even then, when I say that the awards, sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. The other thing that happens with these two is sometimes the awards come in at what we request, sometimes they come in lower, higher, and that. Also, with the time frame over when the awards happen, when we put the budgets together that we submit in for the grant applications, the pricing that was valid at the time that we submitted the grant is not always valid when it's actually time to go purchase the equipment. So what you see here is we were notified of the grant back here in August of last year. But before we were able to bring anything to council, we had to go through the process of identifying the final costs and portions that are going to be needed from the city side, as well as from what the actual reduction was in the grant. We were able to get through that here in January, and with that, then what you're seeing before you today is the final number based on actual costs from the manufacturers. And in this case, we're able to make about a $1.1 million purchase with the $300,000 plus in general fund money. So had we not been able to get this grant, we would have been back to you at the next biennium to fund the full purchase of that program. So,
committee members, Councilmember Anderson, then Huffman.
Thank you. Of course, I'm going to support this. I don't really feel like we have any other choice. It's much essential equipment that our personnel need in order to do their job and protect their health and well-being. Just for the council members, I did send an email yesterday, kind of a lengthy one with multiple questions, and I apologize, Councilmember Hamel, I did not include you in on that, being the chair of the committee. It's more broad-reaching about some financial concerns, so not just pertinent to this one. And plus, I get a little hesitant on including a lot of council members on emails. I'm still fuzzy on not wanting to overstep, but some of the questions were pertaining about time and how long this was knowledgeable, because it didn't come to us in our biennial. And 400,000, thank goodness, it's not the 1.1 million, but I did receive a partial reply from Chief Hewitt about an hour ago. So thank you, Chief, for addressing some of the questions. I appreciate it. I still have concern about the aspect that this would have come in the next biennial, given that some of the information says the end of basically the shelf life is 2022. So putting potentially 1.1 million into the next biennial after the end of the date of when this would have to be purchased doesn't seem very logical. But I guess for me, what was concerning was that we went through a huge budget process and we had no heads up. And I've worked with federal grants and they're not always a given. And I just would caution, not just, I don't want to put one city department on blast, but just in general, budgets are extremely important for management, and we made financial decisions based on what we thought we had going forward into this biennial. And without that information, to consider that potentially we'd have 1.1 million we'd have to approve, we may have looked at things differently. And so that was part of my concern. I do have a question for finance, though. Given the state of our economy and that our revenue is not quite as robust as what we've been accustomed to in previous years, where are we sitting with our unrestricted general budget?
Just assuming general fund unrestricted reserve. Yeah, so we are actually in the process of closing out 2020 and trying to figure out just exactly where we stand. Maybe Andy wants to speak to that more, but we will be coming, Andy and I, in the next couple meetings here with a financial update on our end of 2020 and what we're expecting going forward, including some new thoughts on revenues for 2021. And but broadly, we ended the year, I don't know, with we think around $30 million of general fund reserves total. That's restricted and unrestricted, but we're still fine tuning that.
Did you say 1 million?
No, 30 million.
Thank you. I almost had a heart attack because I was like,
Sorry,
this will take. Thank you. I didn't hear it right. You cut out. Thanks. My rate will lower again. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any additional comments from finance to Councilmember Anderson's question?
I guess just to add to that, we are just trying to close out the year. It takes a while with all the expenses still coming in for 2020, and then trying to align our accruals with accounts receivable and when we need to account for our different revenue sources. And so it does appear that we ended the year much better than we could have ever expected. We're still trying to, we have some specifics we can bring you next meeting. And so Forrest and I are trying to work through the details of that to bring as much current information as we can to all of you, because I know you're all wondering how we did and what that looks like. We sales tax ended much better. You saw through the 12-month period where we were down about 4% of budget and about 2% down from the previous year. So that was much better than we had. And departments did an amazing job really not using all their budget authority. And when we do our projections, it's all based on what budget authority is out there for the departments. And really everyone did an amazing job saving money, not spending to the extent of the budget authority. And so great news on that side, the budget savings on the expense side, and then the revenue not coming in as the worst case scenario, we came in better than that. So it was great to see a year in. And so we do have some good news, not out of the woods, but still very good news for how we ended 2020.
Okay, thank you, Director Asbjornson. Councilmember Hoffman.
So just a couple technical questions. So this FEMA grant was specifically for the purpose of the equipment, correct?
Yes.
And curious, what is the life cycle of this equipment? How long does it generally last?
So with the SCBA's, it's the National Fire Protection Association. They're a national organization that looks at standards and standards for fire protection issues. And typically where they identify it is if your equipment, in this case for SCBA's, if they're more than what they say 2 cycles out from, so if they've changed the rules on how they build that particular product more than 2 times, that's when it reaches its end of life. They don't have a specific year lifespan. I can roughly tell you it's about 10 years that they're out there. Bunker gear very specifically has a 10-year clock on it, but the SCBA's, the national standard, has just identified this 2 cycle, in which case we've reached that particular piece of equipment. When we say cycle, it's basically the next generation. And so we are more than those 2 cycles out. And really the end of life on this is coming because the manufacturer is no longer manufacturing all the parts that we need to keep them running. So that's really where the end of life has come on these. And, Council Member Anderson, when we were talking about the 2022 end of life versus us coming to 2023 and the biennium, was we were able to take advantage of our neighboring departments also had the same generation air pack as we had. And one of them, or actually 2 of them, have gotten federal grants ahead of us. And we were able to take advantage of getting their used equipment to help keep our old equipment running longer. So that's part of why, when we went into this biennium budget, knowing the financial restraints that were coming because of COVID, we went into this budget knowing that we could get through this next biennium if we had to with our current equipment. And which is why we didn't bring this forward earlier. It was just a pleasant surprise that we were able to get the grant. We were able to get those numbers in a spot that was able to work with the finance department and to realize that this was a good financial decision to do now.
Okay.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion here.
Move approval.
Okay. We don't need a second because we're in committee. I just want to bring this up. I listened to Councilmember Anderson's concerns, and I hear them, and I have to say this is the end of life was known on this product because it was 2022. We knew this going into the biennial budget, and yet there was no heads up on this. This is not pocket change. This is not stuff that we're looking in the couch cushions for $400,000. This is real money. I take my position of spending other people's tax dollars very seriously, and I would appreciate in the future a heads up on substantial budget adjustments that we think that are coming along. This has happened before with fire. I voted for purchasing fire trucks out of budget multiple times. And the 7 years that I've done this now, I would like to have some consideration when it comes to when we're talking budget and finances, to have a little bit more of a clear picture for the public. This is really for their benefit, for them to understand how we're spending their money. I'm not opposed to this. This is a good use of tax dollars. This is life-saving gear that our city staff members need to have. What I'm asking for is a better heads up going into budget. That's it.
And I very much can appreciate that. And we, again, this is one where, our intention was to bring it forward in the next biennium with knowing that our drop dead date was going to be into that next, or we were going to be able to keep the equipment serviceable, I should say, through this biennium, and knowing that the budget restraints that we had. in this particular biennium. So we were planning on bringing it forward to you again. It ends up being a pleasant surprise that we were able to get the funding. We were able to get pricing that fit within what the funding had, and that that our revenues and expenses here in the city, were such that we were able to identify that, yes, this was a reasonable move that we could bring before council.
Yeah, this doesn't reflect on, this is a question of process. That's where my concern is, that when we go into these budgetary considerations, that these are big items that we need to be thinking about. And I just want to have a better heads up for council members when reaching those decisions. I will be supporting this. Committee members, any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. I'll bring this forward to the full council this evening. Thank you, Chief Hewitt. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So
End of committee.
no worries.